And that is without voice of the customer, you're guessing. And in a business context, guessing can be very expensive. The adage is good marketing makes you money, bad marketing costs you money.
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by One Accord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
So plenty of minutes here to lead in. I'm going to first read through your bio, and that'll cue for our editor to start there. Well, Andrew, it is a pleasure. It's exciting. It's fun to have you on the Value Factory podcast. To all of our listeners and watchers, I'm really pleased to introduce Andrew Ballard. Now, let me tell you about Andrew. Andrew is the president and chief growth strategist of Marketing Solutions, and that's a Seattle area agency that develops research-based growth strategies for organizations that are committed to revenue acceleration. So this is what we have in common. Andrew has 35 years experience specializing in marketing research, strategic planning, brand development, advertising, and digital promotion, and more. He's worked with and helped hundreds of public and private and nonprofit sector organizations from startup through Fortune 500 companies to all improve productivity and profit. In addition to being a marketing guy, Andrew's also a graduate of the Ford Marketing Institute, but certified in Six Sigma. So before launching Marketing Solutions back in 1997, he was the executive director for the March of Dimes. And this is a nonprofit organization that I have close family ties to. And before that, he worked for a CBS broadcast affiliate in sports marketing with the Seattle Seahawks. If that wasn't enough, Andrew is a respected author, educator, keynote, and TEDx speaker. His articles on marketing strategy have been published in business journals across the country, and his book, Your Opinion Doesn't Matter, has been endorsed in both corporate and academic circles as being innovative and exciting. So to cap it off, Andrew is an adjunct faculty member at the University of Washington School of Business and is a frequent guest lecturer at Seattle Pacific University. Oh my gosh, Andrew, thank you for hanging out with me on the Value Factory.
Nick, I got to take you on the road with me. That's the best introduction I've had. Love it.
Well,
Great to be here.
It's been awesome getting to know you. We first met what seems like a couple of years ago, but maybe it was a year and a half ago. And then spending more time has been delightful. Now, I have to say, for anyone who's watching and wondering what the heck is this background behind me? No, it's not a virtual background. I'm standing on one of the showroom floors of Park Place Motors. I guess if I go this way, where right behind me is an Aston Martin DB9 and a host of other exotic and luxury cars. There's a connection of Park Place Motors to One Accord that I hope to kind of weave into our conversation today, but I'm coming to the Value Factory live from the showroom floor at Park Place Motors. And Andrew, welcome. So
thank you.
Here's our intro.
Great to be here.
Yeah, man. So we had started talking and I said, wait, let's roll camera, because I knew that the conversation we were going to get into would be elucidating, would be exciting, would be helpful for the people that are paying attention. And here again, our audience, there's two kind of, call it people groups in our audience. One is the entrepreneur, the founder, the owner, the person whom you've advised for 35 years through growth. The other people group in our audience will be professional advisors to those entrepreneurs and founders. So we have many attorneys and CPAs and bankers and lawyers and M&A bankers that listen in. So that's who we're talking to today. And the conversation was branding versus positioning. Did I bring us back to that?
It's a confusing connection. In fact, even a lot of the experts, in my view, just don't quite get it right. And the real focus, if you're an established brand, should be competitive positioning. But the function of branding is about identification. The difference is positioning is about differentiation. And so in our agency, with the voice of the customer, we don't do it on our own. We're not smart enough to figure it out, but our clients' customers are. Just, like One Accord and our connection. But yeah, competitive positioning is probably one of the most important fundamentals of marketing, period.
Competitive positioning. So let's go deeper into that. And maybe, as you say, we can define it by what it is not. So competitive positioning is not fill in the blank for me.
It's not promoting your brand. It's not, generating greater awareness and visibility for the brand. So the easy distinction is we do branding to get on the shopping list, to establish brand awareness, recognition. We get involved in competitive positioning so that we're not just known, but we're known for something specific. And that whatever that specific is, it's designed to distinguish us from everyone else that we directly compete against in our category.
My mind wants to go to a brand, and for whatever reason, I think Nike, but please choose another one that might be a better fit and look at that at the brand and identify what is branding and then how competitive positioning differentiates that brand. Does that question make sense?
Sure. Yeah. And Nike is a bit unique. They've spent billions and billions of dollars since the early 80s when they launched the brand. I mean, their real distinction isn't so much of a product attribute or feature. It has more to do with their promotion strategy. And they launched everything with very top tier professional athletes. Bo Jackson from the Raiders comes to mind. Of course, Michael Jordan took it a whole nother level. And so their strategy was more about establishing credibility through celebrity. So I'll give you one of my favorite competitive positioning case studies. I'll give you the short version. And this also in the early 80s was American Express. And back then, they competed with all of the same service deliverables as the big ones did. Like Emory back then was number one, DHS, certainly UPS, Airborne. And FedEx was at the bottom of the brand ladder. They had probably, if not the lowest, a much lower market share than the other category leaders I just mentioned. Brand new CEO came on and he decided to risk the whole thing by focusing on one deliverable, and that was overnight shipping. And nobody else was trying to own that. And so they were really trying to own that. And of course, it worked beautifully because within 2 years, they went from the bottom of share to the top. But they did this, and it was through research and competitive study, which is you have to get those data sets to effectively position yourself. You don't position yourself in a vacuum, but they came up with the term, if it absolutely positively has to be there overnight, Federal Express. And then it evolved to Fed. And at the beginning of that ad campaign in the early 80s, somebody might throw something to like a big envelope and say, hey, would you overnight that for me? By the end of the campaign, they threw it and said, hey, would you FedEx that for me? FedEx became the generic in the category. So it's
Interesting.
not only a noun, it's a verb, just like Google. Google from Alphabet, right? I'm going to
Right.
Google that verb. And so
Yeah.
when you become like Xerox, Kleenex, Vaseline, these are some of the best managed brands. When you become the generic in your category, you're a winner.
Interesting. So how do I get someone to say, I need to one accord that problem?
That's great.
That's
That's great.
that's the idea. But okay, but on a serious note, like one of the ways I think that I can add value in this context, in the value factory, is if I invite experts like you to diagnose and assess one accord kind of live. I'm not going to put you on the spot in this moment, but I think of, but I will come back to it. But I think of FedEx, which was previously Federal Express. And FedEx has brand colors. And if I don't know it that well, but I would recognize, I think, a logo or it's going to be a white background and there's going to be blue. But I definitely would recognize the brand of UPS, brown, yellow, shield. And yet, so I know that the two do shipping, but like you say, I'm going to FedEx this.
Mhm.
And they
If it
got
has to be there
there.
overnight.
Yeah. And they got there by selecting a service, something that their customers were saying,
They
I need this.
valued,
We
right?
value this. Okay.
In the 60s, 70s, the notion of overnight delivery was not considered to be of high value.
Mhm.
And as we are globalizing and speeding up the pace of business, all of a sudden overnight was a big deal. And because they tried to own the word overnight, which is, a function of branding and positioning both. That's what they got to be known for. And they've come full circle. So they did this 2, possibly 3-year campaign that every commercial ended with, if it absolutely positively has to be there overnight, FedEx. And they reintroduced that. It's actually a tagline. They reintroduced that tagline a year ago. And if you look at all the FedEx ads, I watch a lot of PGA golf. I need to get a life. But FedEx is one of the premier annual sponsors. In fact, the FedEx Cup, that's like the
Right.
top, and that's, those last 3 games in the year are like the playoffs. They're incredible. But they reintroduced that, and now the tagline is absolutely positively. They're trying to trigger those of us that are old enough to remember the original campaign. You might not qualify for that, but I qualified for it twice.
But here, FedEx spends millions of dollars to be the FedEx Cup sponsor, but they don't want to be known for golf sponsorships. They selected that probably because their market demographic, the people that they want to sell to, score high in surveys as being PGA fans,
100%.
fans of the PGA.
100%.
So that's a branding thing. That's not the differentiation, the segmentation, right? I've lost the word that we're comparing branding against right now, but segmentation.
Branding and positioning. Yeah, and competitive positioning.
So the
true.
positioning, though, is that absolutely positively, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, they own that. And, it's communicating a value proposition that is about quality, reliability, consistency. You can always, the point is they're trying to communicate. You can always rely on FedEx to get it there overnight.
Okay. So hopefully I've allowed enough space before I drop that little Easter egg clue that I want to ask you about One Accord. And let's start high level. So we are a professional services firm. We are business consultants. That's the highest level kind of classification. What we do within professional services and consulting, begins to differentiate it. So we have some branding, we have a logo, we have a tagline, building value, built on values. What would you do if I hired you, Andrew, and I said, hey, help us position? Maybe don't give me the answers for free, but what's the process that you would go through and, to help kind of uncover what our competitive positioning opportunities are?
Sure. And frankly, I already think that you do a good job, especially with what I know is the more recent tagline, which is delivering value built on values. Did I get that right?
Building value built on values. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great tagline because you're distinguishing One Accord based on being mission and values based, that you can. So there's, you're communicating integrity. Trust is the number one thing you need to establish, especially in a service business. So to get to your point about process, this is my favorite part. And this is what I wrote the book on, candidly. And that is we gather 3 data sets to position. So the output is organic based on aggregating and aligning the 3 data sets. And the 3 data sets are first on our client. So this would be on One Accord if I were working with you, and it would be really to expose your core competencies, what you do really well. And you guys are just absolutely brilliant about helping companies transition to what's next. And you do it in ways that are far beyond many traditional growth organizations. I happen to know that your deep dive is pretty phenomenal. So that's the first data set, One Accord competencies. And you've got a good list there. The second has to do with the voice of the customer. You mentioned that. And that's really the foundation of what we do and what we promote. And that is without voice of the customer, you're guessing. And in a business context, guessing can be very expensive. The adage is good marketing makes you money, bad marketing costs you money.
Well, and I just want to pause there to be really transparent. What you've just said is so true. And we have not done it. We have not collected the voice of our customer at the level that I think we could, dare I say, should. And so if there's anyone listening, this is kind of like a you're not alone statement, but I recognize how difficult it is. So we send out surveys to clients, at various intervals in our engagements, and surveys don't get responded to, or we get kind of the yes, 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 click through.
Low
Okay, I'm
hit
done.
rate.
Yeah. And, it's also, it's a bit, there's some anxiety to asking a customer what they think of us, because I don't know, they might tell me they don't like me. I'm just
Right.
being honest. Like, this is
But
a
I tell
thing.
you what,
Yeah.
that's probably the best thing you'll ever hear,
Isn't
because
it?
it'll get you off ether and have you focus on what is valuable, important, addresses the pain points, solves the problem, satisfies the need, any of those overplayed axioms, but they're really true.
So I just,
Understanding what engenders loyalty and what motivates behavior on behalf of your customer is very rich data. And so it's very illuminating. We've actually run about 500 companies through our competitive positioning process. And 9 times out of 10, the data exposes something that we never even thought of. And then the third data set is a competitive study. Really take a look at what the direct competitors within your space. If you're proximity based, then there's going to be a market radius or a polygon. If there really isn't geographic constraints, maybe it's a language constraint. But the point is, take a look at your biggest customers, your biggest competitors, and really understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, and try to ascertain what their positioning strategy is. Because the only way you can own a place in the mind of the consumer, like FedEx did with overnight, is if you really understand not only what the consuming, the demand side of the equation are most interested in, but you need to know the supply side too, because you can't position yourself in a way that looks like, smells like, quacks like a competitor, because then you won't have a distinction.
of those three areas, looking at core competencies, the voice of the customer, and then the competition, the core competencies, I think we can look within and discern on some level what we think we're good at, but the customer will actually tell us what they think we're good at, won't they?
Right.
So we need that voice of the customer.
Of the three data sets, it is absolutely the most important. Like you said, most people are not gathering that data. You really need to gather data from customers who have had a recent experience with your product, your service, your people,
And you
etc.
have, there's that Six Sigma, training that you've got, but you also have a real analytical and kind of quantitative, in addition to qualitative process. Like, you have methodology. There are certain sample sizes that you have to obtain and so forth that you've walked me through. And we don't need to go into all of that detail, but I think at the high level, what I value so much about your contribution and into this space is that voice of the customer. And again, if we look at competitor data as we are collecting customer data, to ask the question, well, whom else might you buy from? Where else do you shop? Why
Right.
might you choose a competitor over brand? Why would you choose brand X over brand A? And again, that voice of the customer data is just so valuable.
You are very intuitive, because you actually just demonstrated two of the questions that we ask. And I want to give one quick distinction between a traditional customer survey, like what you indicated that you do, that has a
Yeah.
low hit rate. You're not unique. I mean, surveys,
I got you. Yeah.
but a customer survey is designed to generate a response, right? Question, response, etc. Voice of the customer is not designed to generate a response. It's designed to generate a conversation, thereby generating far richer data. And the voice of the customer is a Six Sigma technique that was developed by Motorola in the early 80s. They were a pioneer in the Six Sigma space. And now, we've really combined Lean and Six Sigma. They're very common outputs, but the inputs are different. Lean is very focused on reducing waste, and Six Sigma is focused on reducing the variance that causes defects and errors. Defects from a product context, errors from a human context.
Yeah. It's interesting, this relationship between Six Sigma, Lean, Kaizen, and Lean,
Yeah,
Kaizen, even bringing voice, from the bottom up kind of feedback in, but
right.
Lean being at the center of reducing waste. How much energy do we put into trying to collect customer information in a survey that's the question response, but it's what we've got, and there's always room to improve. Let me bring back just kind of this where I'm at in location today. So I'm on one of the showroom floors of Park Place Motors, and it's starting to get exciting here. It's about 10:30 a.m. local time, and if I think about this business, it was founded about 30 years ago, created 30 years ago by a couple of friends that came together and said, we don't like the car buying experience. They were car enthusiasts. And so let's just say the proverbial like used car salesman. I put my fingers in air quotes for anybody that's just listening. Because what I'm surrounded with, if I take a step to the side here, they're all used cars, but they're beautiful, collector, rare used car. So Butch and Dave said, we want to do this different. We want to be better at, we want to be more transparent, easier to deal with. And so they grew to a very sizable, I don't know what the total revenues are, but I'll just say it's a large business. And over 30 years, I want to say 30,000 customer transactions. 30,000 customers have bought and sold or consigned or traded cars here. And so much data is available to help Park Place better serve clients in these questions of why did you choose to consign your car here? Why did you choose to buy whatever vehicle, this Aston DB9 right behind me? Why did you choose Park Place over others? And maybe that positioning is, well, they know more about cars, they're easier to deal with, something like that. The branding is interesting. Sometimes I feel like I'm walking on the set of Miami Vice when I come on to the dealership here with all the neon and palm trees. That isn't why I come here. I know, and people regionally know Park Place to be the place to come for that vintage, that classic, that collector car that maybe they've always wanted. So it's an interesting kind of juxtaposition to where I'm at and the conversation that we're having.
Well, you shared something, I don't know, less than 10 minutes ago, Nick, that was right on. And the word you used was segmenting. And the reason that is so important in the process of positioning, in fact, the foundation of marketing, we call it STP, segmenting, targeting, and positioning. First, you have to segregate the macro market into micro segments. It's like cutting a pie, 100% of the market, into segment pieces, because not everybody within a market thinks, believes, values, is motivated by the same conditions. But there is a segment, like for instance, the point here is like, buying used cars. Okay, that's a huge macro market, but they are targeting a segment, an affluent segment that has interest and values into really special, cool cars like the Austin behind you. I'm starting to feel all James Bondish all of a sudden.
Well,
But
and that's a great connection to STP being the brand we'd recognize connected to vehicles as well.
yeah, it's kind of a
Well,
double entendre.
let me bring it all the way back to where I said, what would you recommend for One Accord? What are your observations in terms of our competitive positioning that could also be applicable to any of the other professional service firm operators that might be in?
So I know One Accord really well since its very first days. And the thing that I really like, the assets that you have that will make it easier to competitively position One Accord, is that you're highly focused. One of the dangers in positioning is trying to be known for doing all things for all people. But when you attempt that, you eventually end up being known by nobody for nothing. Now, I know
Oh, yeah.
that's not grammatically correct, but you get the
But
idea.
But you are speaking into my experience. When I came on board with One Accord in late 2023,
Yeah, as the CEO, I
we
remember.
were in that position as having diversified our scope and our focus into a few different areas. And our observation was that we confused the market. We were not positioned well in that thing where our core competence was aligned. We'd endeavored into other areas. And so that was one, let's get
It
us
makes it
focused.
harder to grab a handle on. You want to give your target market a handle they can grab onto. The reason the voice of the customer is so important is you can take a look at your competencies, take a look at the values of the customers, and then take a look at the vulnerabilities or maybe the openings in the
Mhm.
competitive landscape. And the idea is to align those, right? You want to make sure that you're connecting a core competency to something that your customers already value. And then you want to make sure that whatever that is, it's not a position one of your competitors is already claiming, right? So, what is usually necessary is that you need to really innovate something, maybe massage, adjust, strengthen a competency that is really aligned well to specific attributes, characteristics that your customers care about. And that's when you're going to get their attention, especially if it's unique in your category.
I'm thinking again here, Park Place, and the ownership group has contemplated a few different things, some ideas. How do we enhance our customer experience? And maybe one of them is to have a barista, an espresso bar here, which would be cool. I mean, listen, I love a latte, but if we think that we're going to be competitively positioned because we serve the best lattes in and around the Seattle area, that's not gonna do it. However,
Doesn't connect back to the
yeah,
product category.
the dealership has what is known as the auto salon, and we might refer to this as a detail shop. So sure, full auto detail, but they also do a wash, which is far more economical. It's more expensive than running your car through the brush car wash, but nobody would take one of these cars through a brush car wash.
No,
But I'll tell you, the wash is almost on par with any detail I've ever taken my car through for less than half the price, maybe a third or a quarter of the price, depending on. And so here's a space where uh, a collector car owner wants their car hand washed, and they know that they can bring it to the Park Place Auto Salon. That becomes a competitive position, I would imagine, that also keeps customers engaged, coming through to, perhaps see more inventory or drive by and take a look. And so that, in addition to a service center and specialty repairs, I think those things. Whereas I'll make a big leap here. I worked in banking for a number of years, and banks saw the writing on the wall that folks don't like going into a bank branch to stand in line
Mhm.
to deposit a paycheck. And so everything was going digital. And we thought, oh no, we've got all these big buildings and these people in. We need to find a way to continue to bring people in. So let's put a TV in our lobby. Let's get some magazines. Let's make some coffee. Let's turn our branches into community meeting centers. And it was like catching a falling knife. People just didn't want to come into the branch anymore.
Right. Yeah, well, that's just an evolving market. And if we don't pay attention to that, we're going to go out of business like Blockbuster Video. I mean, the writing was on the wall for that in terms of that streaming, like the internet, wasn't a fad. I mean, it was going to be a stable delivery system. And they didn't get it. And of course, bankruptcy, blah, blah. But so a couple things getting back to Park Place. First of all, auto salon, the terminology rather than detail. I love it because, first of all, it does communicate a much bigger deal, and it's something that will resonate with your more affluent target market. So I think that is a really good intersection.
Well, let's face it, guys like you and me would enjoy saying to somebody, we're going to the salon, right?
You bet. Hey,
Referencing the matching haircuts.
yeah. Hey, I get pedicures. They're fun. Yeah, we see the same barber.
That's it.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I will say this, though, that trying to position, so I love the salon idea because it keeps the pipeline full. You're getting people on site and you're reinforcing the brand, and they want to distinguish themselves through a stellar experience. So I think that is great. I almost, though, look at that more as a service attribute than I do a positioning strategy. Because you had mentioned the goal was to really deliver a stellar experience.
Mhm.
So it's one thing, you've got to have the product on the showroom floor that is going to pull in that more affluent target market. And then you want to give them an experience. So I literally would have them go through the voice of the customer, and I would ask simple questions that are standard in voice of the customer or VOC. Like, what is it about your experience with Park Place Motors did you value most? What did you really love about your experience? And we purposely use emotional words like love, because again, we're trying to engage in a conversation. Oh, this. Well, great. Why was that important? And this is where voice of the customer goes way beyond in terms of output and reliable data sourcing than does a customer survey. Is that you get, on an online survey, there is no probing. Click a box, type in a short answer, whatever. But based on the response, the researcher can't probe. But on a voice of the customer, they're one-on-one interviews, and we do them through the phone. We don't want the video to be part of the equation. And we stage a scenario whereby they absolutely believe that their inputs will be anonymous. But what was that? So I liked ABC. Why is that important? Well, because of CBS. The point is the why is more important than the what. Right. Okay, this is what I like it. The why is what leads us to the underlying motives that drive consumption or consuming behavior. Because at the end of the day, in terms of marketing or growth strategies, we're trying to influence behavior, right? I mean, we want more people coming to us and not to some other high-end used car dealerships.
That's right.
I think Park Place probably has the best brand awareness, certainly on the east side. I'm not typically going out shopping for Austin Martins or some of the other 6-digit vehicles behind you. So I might not be personally an expert in that category, but my guess is the list of competencies is pretty high. And I would love to run those competencies through the filter of what their customers value most. And when you do voice of the customer, to kind of close that loop, is you want to make sure that you're interviewing people that have had a recent experience. You don't want to talk to someone who's, I made a purchase 3 years ago. They're not going to have an accurate memory of their experience. So you want something 6 months or less is the general rule.
Really good. Well, we could, I'm sure, talk a lot more about voice of the customer. We can talk a lot more about positioning and branding and strategic growth. So I think we should do that in a follow-up conversation. I'd love to just have a regular series of conversations with you, Andrew. So
I'd love it.
let's do that. Okay. Well, in closing, wrapping up, I'll say for now, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you if they were interested to learn more?
Well, they can certainly go to One Accord, who has all my information. Our brand is Marketing Solutions. And for your audience, One Accord and Marketing Solutions, while we do have a lot of similarities, we also have unique services and we work together.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
just we have a real high regard and level of respect for One Accord. But you could just go to your browser and type in Andrew Ballard Marketing Solutions, and we'll be at the top of the page. Just to keep
because
it.
you've done SEO right. And in full disclosure to our audience, what Andrew said is to be really explicit about it. We will work with Andrew in collecting voice of the customer information as we engage in strategic planning and long range growth planning. So we're aligned in that regard, and so we're here again. It's been cool to get to know you over the couple of years, and I look forward to everything we're going to do in the future, Andrew.
It's been a pleasure, Nick. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, until next time, thanks for tuning into the Value Factory. As I come in live from Park Place, I hope there wasn't too much distraction, but it's been fun hanging out here. We'll see you next time.